Hi guys, and welcome to another video. I've been painting up some Death Guard just recently, as I've got a small tournament coming up when lockdown lifts, and been posting some pictures to my Instagram, and I've had some requests on there to actually do some tutorials for the Death Guard. So here we are. It's a relatively simple scheme. This sort of, I suppose you could call these Pallid Hand, although I haven't painted them specifically to be the Pallid Hand. But it's just a relatively simple sort of bone armoured scheme for your Death Guard. So this is a sort of result we're going to be working towards with the miniature, and I hope you enjoy. So let's get painting. So here's the miniature that we're actually going to be painting up for the Death Guard. What I've done is I've given the whole miniature a spray of the Corax White spray. And then with some thinned down Corax White, just the red yellow paint, I've just gone over the armour parts again, just with a thin coat to make sure that we've got a nice solid Corax White on which to then start building on that bone colour. Don't worry too much about the rest of it, like where the metallics are or the fabrics or stuff like that, because we'll just neaten up those areas as we go. So the first thing you're going to want to do after you've got your nice uniform Corax White down is grab some Seraphim Sepia. And you're just going to want to wash all of the armour with the Seraphim Sepia. Just a sort of a light wash. You don't want the colour to start pooling anywhere. We'll go back and sort of make sure our recesses look alright in a bit. So I've got some Seraphim Sepia here, and it's just going to be a case of sort of in a controlled manner, sort of trying to avoid pooling as much as possible. Just sort of spreading that Seraphim Sepia around on the armour panels. Don't worry if you make a mess here or you're not neat. As I say, we'll go back and tidy up later. Where possible, try and get your pooling if there is going to be any sort of collecting in the recesses. That will just help make them stand out a bit more. And I'm just going to go around all the armour and with the Seraphim Sepia, and I'll be back when I'm done. There we go, with our Seraphim Sepia wash applied, you can see the sort of armour's taken on that bony colour. However, some of the recesses aren't quite as dark as I want them to be, so I've just swapped over to a slightly smaller brush with a bit of point to it. And what I'm going to do is just a bit of recess shading, just to sort of bring some definition back out in the areas that that I want to stand out a bit more. So, like for example, in this bit here, it's not quite as dark as I want it to be underneath that lip there. So I'm just going to use this Seraphim Sepia again and just do a bit more of an applied wash just to the sort of this underside of this particular bit here, just to make that stand out a bit more, and sort of maybe go around some of the bits around here and some of the sort of rivets. Just do as much as you want, and once you finish doing that, if you don't feel as though that's brought enough definition to the miniature, just grab some Agrax Earthshade and maybe go sort of into the deepest recesses with the Agrax Earthshade, and once you've sort of done that, you should find that your recesses are sort of fairly distinct, and that'll make the miniature pop a bit more as well. So I'm just going to go around and touch up my recesses a bit more, and I'll be back once I've done that. With the recess shading done, the next thing I want to do is start blocking in some of the areas that I want to be black, and to do that I'll be using Black Templar contrast paint. Now in some of the areas you're not going to have to worry about neatening them up, like on the gun casing, because we're going to be applying 2 coats of the contrast paint to get a nice solid colour. On some of the other areas, like the ribbing on the back of the legs here, I have just neatened that up with some Corax White, just so that the contrast paint will actually work on there, and it sort of means that we don't have to come back and highlight it later. I'll just sort of show you. So I've just got some of the Black Templar here, so just applying it over that area. You can sort of see how the contrast paint is sitting in the recesses, but not so much on the raised areas. So it just means that we don't have to come back later and highlight that area. So I mean, that's pretty much that area done. The other area I'm going to be painting black will be the gun casing. But in some instances, on some of the Plague Marines, you might also have to do the sort of ribbing in the palm of the hand. So just watch out for that. So I'm just going to get this gun casing painted up, and then I'll be back with the next step. Right, and that's the Black Templar on and dry now. You'll note that I've also done this knee pad and the shoulder pad up here. It's going to be a bit different on each of my Plague Marines. I just want to have a couple of plates where I've got black accents on them. On this particular one, it's those two. You'll note the black helmet on the example at the start of the video, whereas this guy doesn't have one. We're now going to move on to Balthasar Gold, starting some of the metal work here. It's really up to you where you put this. I use the Balthasar Gold on all the sort of decorative metal work, and then I save the Leadbulcher later on for like the working metal work. But anyway, I've got some Balthasar Gold tin down to the side, and on this particular miniature, it's going to be all the trim around the armour, shoulder pads, etc., where we're going to be painting in the Balthasar Gold. So just start where you fancy and get that blocked in. Try not to get any on the bone armour if you can help it, but if you do, I found that Ushabti Bone, very thin layer of Ushabti Bone, sort of matches the bone colour in the background, so don't stress too much if you do get some of this on there, but try and avoid it if at all possible. So I'm just going to go around, get the Balthasar Gold painted in, and then I'll be back once I've done that. With the Balthasar Gold now painted on, it's time to move across to Leadbulcher, and as I said before, this is like for all the working metal. In this instance, it's going to be the rest of the casing on the gun, and possibly the decorative bits around the gun, the knife, all the sort of metally bits on the backpack, and this particular marine also has like these studs. So I'll be painting those in as well. But I'll let you see what exactly I've painted up with the Leadbulcher once I've done that. So I've just got some Leadbulcher down here, thin down a bit, and I'm just going to be going around and blocking in all the areas that I want to be silver. Again, if you go over the black, just touch it up with some of the contrast paint, and I think the only thing you really got to be careful of trying to avoid is the bone armour. But I'll be back once I've got this all blocked in. With the Leadbulcher now all painted in, it's time to just base in our last metallic colour, and that's going to be Retributor Gold. And with this, we're pretty much just going to be doing the bullet casings, or the bolter casings. So I've got some Retributor Armour, I think it is actually, just thinned down to the side here. And it's just going to be a case of blocking this colour in. It should be nice and easy, fairly quick step this. And I'll just get that done, and then I'll be back with the next step. And with the Retributor Armour now painted in, we're just going to paint in the leather here as well. So there's some leather here, I'm assuming it's leather, and then there is some on the back here as well. And to paint that in, we're going to be using Dryad Bark. So I've just got something down to the side here, and it's just going to be a case of applying 2 thin coats of the Dryad Bark to the leather. So I'll just get that done, and then I'll be back with the next step. With your Dryad Bark now painted in, it's time to grab some Agrax Earthshade, and this time we're going to be putting wash over all the metallics we just painted in. So that's the Balthasar Gold, the Leadbulcher, and the Retributor Armour, as well as that snakebite leather, or Dryad Bark rather, on the leather pieces as well, as I'm trying to say. So yeah, just grab your Agrax Earthshade and give everything, apart from your armour, pretty much, a coat of wash. Just be neat around the armour, but otherwise give everything a fairly decent coat, because you want this to look all old and grimy. Try not to let it pull too much as usual. And I'll be back once I've got that done. With the Agrax Earthshade wash now dry, it's just time to start highlighting up some of the metalwork. For that, I'm going to be using Stormhost Silver. This is just going to be a case of going around the miniature and edge highlighting the gold, the bronze, and the silver that we've already painted on. So for like on things like the weapon here, it's just going to be a nice simple case of just sort of dragging the edge of the brush around all the sharp edges to highlight those. Or on details like this chest piece, I would possibly just catch this top bit just to give it a bit of extra shine to sort of demonstrate that it's sharper than the rest of the edges. So just go around the metalwork and highlight with Stormhost Silver as you see fit, and I'll be back with the next step once I've finished doing that. With the edge highlighting of the metal now done, I would encourage you to change your water, because there are possibly plenty of small metal flakes floating around in there now, and you don't want to contaminate the rest of your paintwork. So what we're going to do now is move on to Tesseract Glow, and I'm just pretty much going to want to be dropping this into the recesses on the sword here to sort of make the cracks look as though they're filled with nasty, pussy green nastiness. So yeah, just using a fine brush, grab some Tesseract Glow, and then just start sort of introducing that into the recesses on the blade. And you can also do that on the armour. Some of the Plague Marines have cracks in their armour, so if you want you can introduce some of that into those cracks as well. So I'm just going to go around and do this. I don't think there's any cracks on the armour on this particular Marine, so I'll just get this sword done. And then I'll be back with the next step. With the green glow done, moving on to Nihilakh Oxide now to start adding some verdigris to the metalwork to sort of give it an aged, grimy look. So as I said, I'll be using Nihilakh Oxide for that. Again, you want a fine tip brush, not too much on your brush, you don't want to overload the areas, and it's just going to be a case of going around and as and where you want the verdigris, sort of around the rivets here, in corners where water might collect or rust might start. Just sort of go around, pop in the verdigris where you want it. This part's completely optional, completely up to you how much of this you do. Not too much, don't overdo it, but just have fun with it. So I'll just get this done and then I'll be back with the next step. With the verdigris done, it's time to start highlighting some of the black detail where required. So it'll just be on this one, the knee pad. There's not an awful lot on the gun, so it'll just be sort of this holster bit, and then there's some work on the shoulder pad. So to do that, I'll be using some thinned down Dawnstone. It's just going to be a case of very carefully highlighting the sharp edges where required on the black part. So for example, it'll be the top of the gun here. Just using the side of my brush to gently draw a line down there and catch some of the edges and the sort of raised rivet bits on there. And on the knee pad, there's quite a sharp bit running down the centre, so you can just sort of gently catch that with your brush. There's a small rivet in there. And then the same for the shoulder pad, just go around all the sharp edges. So I'll just get this done, and then I'll be back with the next step. With the black now highlighted, it's now time to start highlighting up the leather, and to do that you'll want Gorthor Brown. So I've just got some thin down to the side here, and again this is just going to be a case of edge highlighting all those areas that we wanted to be leathered, so we painted up with the Dryad Bark. So that'll be this part here, and also the straps on the knife at the back then. So I'll just get those done and then I'll be right back. With the leather highlighted now, we're going to be painting up the strange demon face thing on this shoulder pad. So the first paint I'm going to be using is Deathguard Green. So I've just got some thin down to the side here, and it's just going to be a case of blocking in the colour aside from the horn and the teeth and the eye. I suppose you could get the eye It's just going to be a case of blocking in the colour. Now you will possibly need a couple of thin coats of this just to get a nice smooth coverage. Nice simple step this. So just go around, get a smooth coat of this Death Guard green down, and then come back for the next step. Once your Death Guard green's based in, you want to grab some Athonian Camoshade. It's time to give the Death Guard green a quick wash to bring those recesses back out again. So as normal washes, sort of apply enough so that you can actually get the effect you want, and just watch out for pooling. So I'll get this done, I'll let it dry, and I'll be back with the next step. While you're waiting for your Athonian Camoshade wash to dry, you can move on to the next step, which is just to base in all the tentacles with Rakarth Flesh. This is just to prep them for a later stage. This will be different on each Plague Marine you do, but if you just grab some thinned down Rakarth Flesh and then just start blocking them in. You might want to do a couple of thin coats with this just to get a nice smooth finish, solid finish of the Rakarth Flesh done, and then hopefully by the time you've done this, the Athonian Camoshade will be dry, and we can finish that step off. But just carry on with this in the meantime, and then I'll be back once I've done this. With the Athonian Camoshade now dry, it's time to start highlighting up some of the sort of raised edges on the face here. So I've just moved over to Krieg Khaki. I've thinned that down a bit. And you pretty much just want to touch all the sharpest points, the raised edges, so sort of around the teeth, around the eye. Just catching these sort of sharpest edges and highlighting as best you can, just so they stand out a bit more. Be as careful as you can here. Nice steady hand. Yeah, I'll just get that done, and then I'll be back with the next step. With the face highlighted up, the last step is just to paint in the eye, but I'll possibly do that off camera because that's going to be a bit fiddly. But the colour I'll be using is Dorn Yellow, so that's a nice bright orange which should make the eyes stand out. And then you'll just want to go over the pustules again with some Rakarth Flesh, just to get a base colour in there for a future step as well. So I'll just get that eye painted in, and then we'll move on to the next step. With the eye dotted in, that's now the sort of skin and the face of that demon thing pretty much finished. What we're going to move on to now is finishing off the tentacles and the flesh. So the areas that you have based with the Rakarth Flesh, you now want to cover with a contrast paint called Guilliman Flesh. So I've got some to the side here. I can use this straight out of the pot. And nice simple step. This is just going to be a case of blocking in those areas that you have painted up with the Rakarth Flesh. Being neat, you don't want to get the Guilliman Flesh onto your armour if you can help it. But otherwise, it's a nice easy step this. So I'll be back once the Guilliman Flesh is applied and dry. With the Guilliman Flesh now dry, I'm just going to move on to another contrast paint called Magos Purple. And this is going to be to give my tentacles a purple tone that gradually gets stronger as we get closer to the end. So to do this, you want to apply some of the contrast paint to your brush, not a huge amount, and we're just going to want to start sort of near the top here. Apply some of this contrast paint, again watching out for the armour. You just want to sort of cover the entire tentacle from about 3/4 of the way up. Just sort of apply some of this Magos Purple. And then let that dry. And then you'll want to apply another coat, but starting ever so slightly further down. Let that dry. Apply another coat starting a bit further down, let that dry. And then just do like the very tip. And by the time you've done that, you should have a tentacle that starts off this sort of fleshy colour at the top and gradually gets purple the further down you go, which I think creates quite a nice effect. But anyway, I'm just going to do that for all the tentacles on this miniature, which there are not many on this one, and then I'll be back. And with that purple gradient now done, it's time to highlight the tentacles where required. Not all the tentacles will need this, but like for example with this one, it's naturally got sort of a fairly sharp edge to it. So we're just going to go back to our Rakarth Flesh, thin down, and apply a highlight. You sort of can just drag your brush along that sharp edge, and that should apply the highlight quite nicely. So you want to do that, sort of make sure that you're being neat. Applying the highlight down the ridges there. I will possibly just put a bit of a highlight around this pustule edge up here, where it is naturally already kind of highlighted by the contrast paint. And I'll just get that done, let it dry, and then I'll be right back. Right, next step is to paint in some of all of the pustules. So I've just quickly gone around the miniature and double check to make sure all the sort of pustules have a base coat of Rakarth Flesh. And I've now gone and got my Iyanden Yellow contrast paint, and over all the pustules I'm just going to give each one a generous amount of the Iyanden Yellow on each one. That should turn each of them a rather sort of nasty, sort of spotty colour. Just go around with Iyanden Yellow, catch all your pustules, and then I'll be back with the next step once I've done that. With the pustules now all painted in, it's time to move on to prepping the horns for painting. So to do that, we're going to need to move back to our Corax White. So you want to get some thin down to the side here. Get your Corax White thin down. And then you're just going to want to go over any of the sort of mistakes that you've made that are covering the horns. Like for me, here I've got some of the Seraphim Sepia on the horns earlier, so I'm just going to use the Corax White to tidy that up. So just go around, grab all your horns, clean the teeth up on the shoulder pad here. Going to want to base those with your Corax White as well. And the horns on the side here. Got the horns down on the leg here as well. And yeah, just get all those neatened up with your Corax White, and then we're back with the next step. Alright, with the Corax White all applied and those bones neatened up, it's time to actually paint in the bones. So to do that, you'll be wanting to grab another contrast paint. This one's called Basilicanum Grey, and you're going to want to load your brush up, and you're going to want to try and sort of paint the horns in sections is the best way I can sort of describe it. Trying to do each section in one sort of one sweep, so that you don't get the contrast paint behaving in sort of a weird manner. I'll just try and sort of maybe show you with this horn here. So I'm going to sort of apply the paint to the horn. I'm going to try and do it in one sweep, because then you sort of get that nice smooth application of the contrast paint. If you sort of try and dab it in or paint it in weirdly, it's going to dry, and you'll dry oddly, and you're going to get sort of pooling and staining. So just sort of try and, as best you can, do each section in one sweep, and it should dry smooth. But anyway, I'm just going to go around and do all the horns and the teeth on the shoulder pad here, and I'll be back with the next step. With our Basilicanum Grey now dry, it's time to start highlighting up those bone colours. So we're going for a fairly high contrast highlight here, so I'm just going to go back to Corax White. So I've just thinned some Corax White down to the side. Yeah, loading up my brush. And then it's just going to be a case of finding the sharp edges on the horns, and just highlighting them up, like for example this one here, just sort of following that sharp edge on the bone there, and sort of same with all the other sharp edges on the bone, just highlighting those up. Just take your time, fairly easy step this. So I'll just go around all the bone, get that all highlighted up, and then I'll be back with the next step. With the horns and bone all highlighted up now, it's time to start blocking in the fabric. To do that, I'm going to be painting mine in purple. You can do the same or pick a colour that you want, but I'll be using Naggaroth Night as the base for my purple colour. So I've just got something down to the side here, and it's just going to be a case of carefully, this is quite a strong colour as you can see, carefully applying it to the areas of the cloth, just being careful not to hit any of the other work that you've already done. So I'll just get that based in on the front here and around the back, and then I'll be back with the next step. With our Naggaroth Night base now done, it's time to apply a little bit of shading. So for this you're going to want to grab your Nuln Oil, and you just want to do a recess shade in sort of the deepest recesses with your Nuln Oil. You might need to do a few coats. So like in this area here, I'm just going to put some down here and put some in there. There are a couple of like tears, so I'm just going to dump some of the Nuln Oil into those tears as well. Just do as much of this as you think is necessary. Maybe apply a second coat if it's not as dark as you want it to be after your first pass. But I'm just going to go around the back and do that, and then also around the front, and then I'll be back with the next step. With our recess shading now done, it's time to apply a bit of a highlight to the purple. So for this I'll be using Genestealer Purple. So I've got something down to the side here. And it's just going to be a case of carefully going around the miniature and on the purple, and then just sort of edge highlighting, picking out the most raised points in the fabric, and just applying a bit of a line highlight on all those raised areas. Just to provide a bit of definition. Bit of extra contrast. So I'll just go around the rest of the purple, applying my highlight, and I'll then be back. There's not much slime on this particular miniature, but there is a little bit sort of here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to grab some Corax White and just paint in those tiny little bits with some Corax White, just so that we can do something with them in the next step. So I'll just wait for this to dry now, and then I will be back with the next step. So to start off our slime, we're going to need Tesseract Glow again. Just loading up my brush a bit here, and we're just going to paint in some of that Tesseract Glow where we've just based in that Corax White. You don't need a huge amount here. So I'll just wait for that to dry, and then I'll be back. And Tesseract Glow now dry, I'm just going to use some Biel-Tan Green to shade it a bit. So I did a bit too much on this first one, so I'm just going to pick some of that back out again. This will just provide some definition around the slime, also toning down the how bright the Tesseract Glow actually is. I'll be back with the next step. With the slime painted in, your Death Guard Marine, Plague Marine, is technically done. I'm going to add a bit of weathering to mine, so if you want to follow along with that, you're going to need your Seraphim Sepia again. And it's just going to be a case of putting a few Seraphim Sepia lines in over the armour to imitate rust and sort of like rainwater or something sliding down the armour. So I try and find points where the water might collect. So for example, there's a little dimple here. So I will sort of put in a bit of a squiggle up the leg like that, and when it dries it will dry quite dark. Might just go around a few of the rivets as well. Don't have to be overly neat with this, don't want to go too overboard, but you want to make your Death Guard look a bit gross. Let's see that. On the chest here there's a dimple there, so I might try and make it look as though something's used out of there a bit and down from that spike and out of these ones here. Just don't want the armour looking quite so clean. And I'll just carry on around the miniature like that, and I'll be back when I'm done. And with my Plague Marine now not looking quite so clean, I'm just going to grab some Screaming Skull and just go over some of the rivets that maybe have got a bit sort of dull because of the washers, and some of the sharper points near the face, just so the face stands out a bit more. I'm not going to worry about edge highlighting the entire miniature, because if you've made your recesses dark enough, it should make the surrounding edges sort of pop anyway, is my theory, and it also makes painting up your Plague Marines that bit quicker. So I'm just going to go around picking out some of the sharper areas. So you just saw me doing those rivets. I'm going to do the rivets on his knuckles there, and then just do some edge highlighting around the eye visor, just to draw some attention to that. So I'm just going to get that done, and then I'll be back. And with that, your Plague Marine is now finished. I would recommend basing your Plague Marine as you have the rest of your Death Guard army. With a light armor scheme like this, I would recommend a darker base, so that it contrasts nicely, a bit like these ones. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to get this guy based up, and then I'll show you the finished product. I will be creating a separate basing tutorial for this, so subscribe if you want to check that out. But yeah, I'll be back in a bit once I've got this guy based and ready for the table. With the base done, this Plague Marine is now finished and ready for the tabletop. As I say, I will be creating a tutorial for this base, so if you're interested to see how I did that, then consider subscribing so you'll not miss when that comes out. I hope you found this tutorial useful. If you have, again, I would be grateful if you could consider subscribing, giving the video a like. It really helps. and I hope to see you again in the future for more painting tutorials, be it Death Guard, Necrons, Space Marines even. So yeah, cheers, thanks a lot guys, bye.